Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Barrens Chat podcast. I'm Sod, and with me tonight is my co-host Guck. This is a podcast about World of Warcraft by two guys who play it. And just like that, Alpha's here. A lot of feedback, a lot of content is just being showered upon us right now, so probably won't get to a lot of classic stuff as there isn't really much news there. But a ton of great information out there. Obviously, everything in the alpha and that's being data mined is tentative and subject to change, but really just a great time to be interested in WoW as a whole, specifically retail. What do you think, Guck?
Yeah, as far as Classic goes, we only have ZG coming out this week, and that being on a 3-day cooldown, a 3-day cooldown, however you want to think about it, a 3-day reset. You are going to get into groups either with your guild or in a pug setup, which I think is going to be good. I think it's going to be a fun way to meet new people on your server if you're doing the pugs, or to get kind of closer with your guild because of these 20-man groups in ZG. Be on the lookout for that. That's coming out this week. But essentially, I mean, everyone knows that ZG is coming. You know that you're going to be getting in there and going through grinding up charms or whatever it is to get your reputation, to get those specific enchants and things like that. There's some good catch-up gear. So especially if you're someone who followed that second alt wave up to 60, now is a really good time to get into those ZG pug groups, get yourself caught up with gear that will be better than MC gear, and hopefully find a good spot for yourself in a very well progressed BWL solid farm group. So yeah, next week we may talk a little bit more about ZG and what items have dropped for me or for our guilds, and what sort of stuff has been going on. But yeah, I mean, Classic is pretty light and low as far as content, especially when you look at the alpha that everyone's been breaking into this week. Shadowlands is here. We've seen Bastion. We've seen the new kind of starting zone for the Alliance side. I forget the name of it. Is it like Exile's Reach, I think it's called?
Yeah.
And there's that little 2-boss mini dungeon at the end of it. It looks great. I mean, this is one thing that everyone's going to say always, is that the art team does an amazing job at setting up the world. The art team always has their ducks in a row. Like, when you get into a new zone, it feels like a brand new zone. They never repeat or, wash over old stuff. I like that they bring in old and new textures, but they use the old textures in a new way, or the new developed textures, they're just plainly obvious. I'm thinking largely about Ardenwald. I think that zone's going to be incredible. But yeah, I mean, our team knocked it out of the park. But the big thing that I think people have been talking about this week is Shadowlands leveling, and how the level squish is going to affect the timing and the pacing of that leveling.
Yeah, and I think that honestly the leveling part's probably the biggest deal right now, right? Like, they're trying to get new players into the game, and as I found out a couple weeks ago, WoW is not new player friendly. Like, it's confusing, it's overwhelming. You had to get 120 levels, and with this level squish and new leveling area, it opens up more possibilities and experimentation. And Guck and I don't have alpha access, but I've consumed, and I know Guck has consumed, a ton of alpha content, specifically this. And they're giving level 1 to 10, you're unlocking a ton of abilities, so it's not like they're gating you from that. Like, whereas like you might only get one ability every other level, if that, like as you're going through right now, which I have been doing, and it makes it more of a grind. But whereas right now, going 1 to 10 in Exile's Reach, you're filling up your entire action bar with abilities as you unlock them. They're showing you how to use them. They're putting you in group scenarios. You're getting your mount at the end of it. I really think it opens up WoW to like a new player audience. Obviously, right? Like, WoW is an aging game, and a lot of the people that play it are older. I'm in my 30s. Guck, you're in your late 20s. There's people older than me that play it. A lot of people, you don't really see too many young people play it. And I think that having an experience like that is huge to get newer players engaged in the game. And like, when people ask their friends if they want to give it a shot, it'll probably help them, stick with it a little longer than as if you were a new player coming into Duratar and playing through Cataclysm and then going back to Burning Crusade and then Wrath of the Lich King and then back to Cataclysm. So it takes away a lot of that confusion if they stick with it that long, and it really opens up the game. And I think that's awesome. Just getting new people into Azeroth is huge for the lifespan of this game, which we all love, and that that's why we're talking about it. So that's huge.
Yeah, I agree. I think getting new people into the game is always going to help raise sub numbers. I don't think for my playstyle, having brand new players is going to be something that really affects how many mythic raiders there are, or even at the end of the day, ahead of the curve raiders. I think largely brand new people who are getting right into WoW for the first time now are going to be they're going to be stricken by the awesome art and the mounts and the transmog and how powerful you as a character can feel as you progress through these things. I'm hoping that they do a great job with the story, so there's a very engaging narrative. One of the cool things that we're going to see in Shadowlands is a linear narrative. We didn't see that in BFA. You got kind of more player agency and selection over what zone you started in, and even ultimately what side of the conflict you wanted to be on. For the Horde, we got to choose whether you were a Sylvanas loyalist or if you were to work with Thrall and Sourfang. So we're getting away from that, which I think is fine. I mean, that player agency is always good, and it's something that we talk about. But when it comes to the narrative, it's important for the narrative team to have a focused, consistent kind of path, and that translates into the leveling experience to make you want to get to that next level, right? You want to unlock that next little tidbit of the story. So I'm excited to see that. Bellular gave an estimate of around 20 to 30 hours for the new leveling experience. I'm curious to see how that pans out. I would like to have 1 through 60 not be a chore as much as it feels like sometimes, but I don't want it to be something that is so rushed that the new people who come into the game don't have enough time to really fully rehearse their kit. With the unpruning that we're getting, a lot of classes are going to get stuff put back in, and it's important that as you're leveling, you get to know how to use those new things that are being put in. So I'm curious to see how the duration of the leveling changes over time. But right now, I'm really excited to see what the narrative team and whichever devs are working on leveling put out. Because yeah, we're going to see what everyone talks about, or what everyone has talked about so far this week. More effective and efficient leveling that's faster from 1 to 50, and then hopefully a really good, well narrated 50 to 60 experience in Shadowlands. So all of that to me points to an incentivized path to get new players into the game, but to also get them to want to go to level 60. And then for me, that's kind of where the content that I'm into picks up, right? That end game content. So for the individuals who, the hooks get into them on raiding or Mythic Plus or whatever end game system they're attracted to, I think it's important that if you enjoyed the process and you invested in your character up to level 60, a lot of those people who feel connected to their character are going to stick around to the end game. So I'm excited to see it. I don't think ultimately it will result in a huge amount of brand new Mythic Raiders, but I do expect there to be more normal Raiders, potentially more heroic Raiders, plenty more PvP, a lot of people looking for Mythic Plus, and all of those things kind of help everyone. If there's more people out there, that means your queue times are shorter, you're more likely to find a good guild on your server. All of these things are good benefits of making the game better for everyone. But one of the elements that I think we're foreshadowing is, while the game is becoming more approachable, the requirement, the skill floor, as it were, is kind of being raised, and the skill ceiling is being brought down a bit. One of the things that we'll talk about later, because it's not really super relevant to leveling, but there is something that the WoW devs have changed that will be an impact on kind of what people deem to be higher tier play. And we'll talk about that towards the end. But with leveling, I'm actually kind of torn. I talked to you about this earlier, Sod. I have tunes that I haven't played since Legion, so they're level 110. and I think they're going to get squished down to around 40 something. I believe that it'll be a faster and more fun leveling experience to do 40 to 60 in Shadowlands than to do 110 to 120 in BFA. So right now I'm actually kind of torn. Like I don't want to play retail WoW because I want to experience this new leveling.
Yeah, so I'm probably gonna halt my heritage armor until the level squish comes into play, and maybe I'll pick that up again. I'm gonna finish off the two that I'm working on right now, my Volpair and Zandalari Troll, but I'm definitely interested in trying the new leveling experience. I think that is probably going to be awesome for the game. I hope it doesn't take 20 hours to get to 50, but we'll see. It's weird because I'm curious to see how Pathfinder is going to work. If you have Pathfinder in those old expansions, um, what's going to happen with that? Because it looks like you're going to get. I forget the mount things. I sent a screenshot of them, but it's you don't get flying until like you're 30 or 40, which is fine, but when you have Pathfinder, it's kind of a buzzkill because I actually did go out and farm that, and now I don't get to use it. But it's whatever it is. It is what it is, and you got to move on and just kind of go through. It means I probably won't pick the expansion I was going to pick to level up in, but we'll see how that changes it. I'm curious to see if you have to go through an entire expansion to get to 50. I'm also curious to see if you have to if the Legion assaults are going to be up, or the invasions, I mean. So like, everybody knows the Legion invasions, like at towards the end of Legion, and even present day when I'm leveling through Legion, that's what I do. I log on when there's an invasion, and I do the invasion, and I log off that character until the next invasion's up. So it really maximizes my time, means I can spend a minimal amount of time leveling the character, which is fine. I played through Legion enough. I don't need to see the quests and all that. So it's going to be different. It's going to be an adjustment, but I think it'll be a cool experience at least the first time through, and then it'll probably feel like a grind again.
Yeah, to touch back on Pathfinder, I think having planned obsolescence is a normal facet of many games, and especially the MMO world where there are expansions. So we're right now in Classic going through these phases, but we know that Burning Crusade Classic is on the horizon. So eventually there will come a time where all of the work and effort you put into, let's say, getting Thunder Fury, Blessed Blade of the Windseeker on your character, all of those Arcanite bars, all of that stuff, maybe you did a Lionheart helm as well. All of that stuff could be potentially replaced by a standard dungeon blue of a very high level. And that is essentially a planned obsolescence of that item. And again, I mean, this is just a very specific point, and you'd have to kind of conflate essentially items with the achievements. But with Pathfinder, it was important during the expansion. With some Pathfinders, they were important after the expansion. So let's say WAD, if you need to go back and farm Transmog or Maths or something like that, you could do that more easily with Pathfinder. But it's been a long enough time that planned obsolescence can kind of come in and take those parts out. And I don't think it's that big of a deal. For me, having played largely just Legion and BFA, Pathfinder is something that you get almost passively. I know when the Pathfinder achievement became available in whatever patch it was, I definitely went out of my way to go and get it early, but it would have been something that I got passively just from playing the game. So it's not something that I feel I'm losing because I got the benefit out of it early. Being able to fly around the broken shore and being able to fly around the BFA zones before other people, that was the reward. Getting my world quests done more quickly, that was the reward. And now at this point, I feel like, sure, if everyone gets to fly around these outdated zones for their leveling, it doesn't really affect me that much. In fact, it helps me by getting people who didn't play those expansions towards the end game of Shadowlands faster, and those people could potentially be my new guildmates, right? So I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah, and honestly, it makes me wonder, with Pathfinder essentially meaning nothing for the leveling experience going forward. At least that's the way it looks, right? We're speculating right now. Uh, what is going to be the case with flying in Shadowlands? Is it going to be a new Pathfinder inside of Shadowlands? I guess is how I'm trying to say. Like in the new continent, is it going to be a new Pathfinder, or like in 9.1 or 9.2, are they going to just release flying and you can buy it? You know what I mean? Because obviously all of the prior Pathfinder achievements look like they're going to be obsolete with Legion and Legion, Warlords of Draenor, and Battle for Azeroth. So why have it in Shadowlands? Or maybe it will be relevant. If it's current expansion and Pathfinder goes away as you move into the next expansion, maybe something like that. I don't know how they're going to do it, but that kind of does seem how maybe that's a direction they could go in.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think using Pathfinder as it has been for Shadowlands the same way. We have seen news that the um, allied races don't require Exalted anymore, so maybe they change Pathfinder to also only be on Revered, but I kind of doubt it. So I'm again, I'm okay with it. I think in the expansion, Pathfinder works and it makes sense, but after the expansion, Pathfinder is more of a annoyance, right? Think about so from my perspective, I really started playing WoW seriously during Legion, and if I wanted to go back to WoD and do transmog or collect mats that are selling well on the auction house, I almost couldn't because other people who did play in WoD and have Pathfinder, they can fly and get all that stuff way more easily than I can, right? So unless I take the time to go and play old content, I would never get Pathfinder. So I personally don't see the benefit in forcing everyone to go back and play the old content. I think this falls under kind of the same chores that people are tired of in BFA, right? Like no one really likes getting on and doing their islands. No one wants to get on and do the warfronts. This is content that is basically chores, and I think grinding rep from old expansions is super chore. So for me, totally fine with Pathfinder and Shadowlands and beyond, but maybe it becomes a one expansion thing, and then the next expansion you can just fly. Who knows? I personally am okay with these changes.
Yeah, I agree. Even though I did recently get my Draenor Pathfinder, and let me tell you something, that grind sucks. Even to this day, it still sucks. It's probably the worst Pathfinder out there. And to anybody that did it while it was relevant, good on you. I wish I did because I went back and did it like a loser. So unfortunately, that's me. But
Yeah, getting rid of that, I don't think it's not one of the things that Blizzard is doing to make the game overly approachable. I think it's important that they make the game approachable. There are some things that they're doing that makes the game too approachable. Hint, hint, the AoE changes that we'll talk about in a little bit. But this is something that I find to be okay. Old content being more digestible is totally fine by me.
yeah, and the AOE changes now that it's being brought up. What do you think about them? It's not every single AOE spell, right? Like it's only limited to some, not all. And the 8 target thing, like what do you think about it? Like you're primarily a tank slash melee player, right? So that's your play style, and it looks like those are the classes that are getting hit with it, right? Like it looks like Blizzard is still going to hit every person or every NPC inside the Blizzard, but it looks like the melee characters are going to be hit. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I'm going to read out a quote that we got from Blizzard. They say in Shadowlands we're looking at changes that would broaden the field of tactical options, and I think this is kind of a cop out thing to say. I don't think they're broadening tactical options by changing how your kit works. They're not giving you more options. They're just changing how it works. But it is definitely going on to this. They are more clearly differentiating the strengths of classes in a variety of AoE situations. For example, we'd like to see Outlaw Rogues or Fury Warriors excel in situations with 4 to 5 targets, while Frost Mages and Affliction Warlocks will perform better in sustained damage against groups of 5 or more targets. So when you think of those big AoE ballers, mages, locks, essentially casters, they are going to still reign supreme over those very big AoE pulls, But yeah, melee is going to be brought down to these 4 or 5 targets in close proximity. And to me, this just kind of makes it easier for a lower skilled player to hit the damage numbers of a higher skilled player. Essentially, as a high skilled player, you know when to save certain cooldowns for certain pulls in certain situations. And if you're limited in the effectiveness of that, it doesn't matter if you're doing these baller pulls with, 8, 9, 10, 20 enemies because you're only going to be hitting 4 to 5 of them. If you have someone else in your group who isn't as comfortable with their rotation, they don't know when to use their AoEs and how to, properly queue up their cooldowns for it, the difference in damage will be, instead of widened, it'll be narrowed. I think this is a change that will likely have a lot of effect on Mythic Dungeon Invitational. So the MDI obviously is full of really big pulls. And larger pulls, the better. It's a timed dungeon, so you have to get through a certain percentage of trash before you can finish it. And it's going to effectively nerf the top tier players and bring them closer to players who don't handle or can't handle pulls like that. I personally really enjoy big pulls. As like you said, I'm a tank. I play melee. I like those big pulls. It's fun. It's engaging. It's risky. After a certain point, like pulling it one pack at a time gets kind of boring and repetitive and slow. So I'm not a huge fan of this change. This, to me, is one of the things that is going above and beyond to make the game more digestible. And I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, so I almost want to say that maybe it's a balancing thing, right? I mean, I guess it's a theme thing too, right? Like, if you're a rogue, can you really hit 18 of those targets? So, like, no, right? Obviously not, like, real world. But I feel like it might be a balancing thing and an answer to, something that we've seen in the MDI, which went on this weekend too. And there was more of a variety in classes than there normally are, but for the most part, it was very similar comps with 2 unholy death knights and a rogue, or a rogue and 2 hunters, a rogue, a hunter, and a death knight. Yeah, you know what I mean, like so on. Like there was a couple teams that threw out some oddball comps there, but I think maybe it's an answer to that. Maybe it might be a balancing thing, right? Where they want to get more diversity inside their esports, right? Like in the MDI is an esport. It had really good viewership numbers this weekend, and could that be an answer to it? Maybe. I don't hate the change, but I also don't play melee characters, right? So that's, me, I guess, being biased. Like, it doesn't affect me, so I don't really care, right?
All right, I'm going to change my opinion on this. I think now that I'm thinking about it and being reminded of how static compositions are always in MDI, I think maybe Blizzard, and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt here, they're looking at those comps and saying, okay, melee tends to be our single target, beasts, especially when you think about kind of like the classic design of a warrior, right? Beat something down into execute range and then pummel it through execute with literally execute. So when you have these really powerful single target melee classes and they also deal an incredible amount of AoE damage, it does make you think like, why would I ever bring a different class? So yeah, it definitely would lead to static compositions. With this change, it could be more slightly differentiating things into a more, okay, this is your single target spec or class, and these are your AoE specs or classes. In a Mythic Dungeon team, you want to make sure you've got a Frost Mage for your big trash pulls, and you also have a Rogue for your boss fights, instead of just stacking 2 rogues because, one of them's outlaw or they're both outlaw and they're dealing crazy AoE damage and also sustaining numbers in single target fights. I'm okay with that as a result. I like that result. I would like to see MDIs with varied teams and comps. Maybe there's like a meta team comp per dungeon, but I don't want to see a meta team comp for all dungeons. And that's what we saw in BFA. It was one group that was good for any dungeon. Maybe this change could make it more varied. That result I would be okay with. I don't know if this is the right approach to getting that result, but it's if that is what comes of it, it's a step in the right direction. So I'll change my initial stance on that. If we do see varied groups, I'll be happy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, seeing some diversity in that would be, welcome for sure. Especially like the oddball, the teams that did play oddball comps, right? They all got eliminated rather early. They went into the losers bracket, and then they didn't last very long. Method EU is surgical in their like preciseness of clearing dungeons. It's awesome to see those teams that are competing in that event like go to work on those dungeons. Like it's like it really makes me want to try it. I definitely couldn't perform at those levels, but the size of the pulls they don't touch the obelisks. They do 3 obelisks with the last boss. It's like it's ridiculous the pulls that they pull off. And I would imagine the stress that you're under as a healer trying to heal through all that damage. But they're also really great at negating the damage and using Ring of Peace if they have a healer monk in the comp and stuff like that. So it's cool to watch. It's cool to see these players maximize the potential of those classes and really open up to like what they're capable of and really show you what you can be capable of if you play at a high level and if you have the right corruption.
Yeah, I am excited to see what the changes result in, but right now I'm like, I mean, I definitely seem like I'm on the fence because I am on the fence. I want to see the changes to the problems, but I don't know if a really powerful change like this is what we need. This to me kind of is reminiscent of the GCD change we saw going into BFA that really slowed the game down. I don't know if this is exactly as impactful. I don't think it will be. The GCD was a putting more stuff on the GCD was a bad change, and we're not getting those things off the GCD. The game's still going to be fairly slow compared to how fast it was in Legion and before then. And this could just be another one of those pieces. So I'm reserved in seeing how this plays out.
Yeah, definitely understandable, and there's definitely been a lot of complaints about the global cooldown in the alpha because obviously with more spells, there's more things on the global cooldown. It doesn't feel as good, and where Blizzard does want to keep the global cooldown, and another good thing is that they're definitely listening to feedback from the player base and they're responding to like if you pay attention to any of the WoW content websites or the forums, they're talking about what they think about it. I know Ian in Sloot interviewed Ian. It was a really good interview. He didn't like some of the answers from him, but it's good to see that they're going into a different direction and that they're listening to player feedback and that they've been responding in this alpha, and I think that's huge, and they really want to do this expansion right. It looks like they're headed in the right direction for almost everything, and even though tying covenants to player power is getting a lot of hate, it seems like they're locked in on that, and maybe they can do a good job balancing it. Who knows? I'm not going to hate on them until it ends up being crappy, which we won't know until Shadowlands goes live. So definitely keep paying attention to all the stuff in the alpha, and keep in mind everything in the alpha is subject to change, right? We're very early in the testing process right now. Hopefully you and I can get keys got because it looks like it's awesome. The just from looking at it, it looks awesome. And I'm really excited about what the future of WoW holds, and I like a lot of the content creators are too. It seems like everything is trending upwards, which is great after this expansion.
Yeah, the devs have their ducks in a row with the community management. They have, we've seen Ian, like you mentioned, interview with Sloot. We've seen a lot of activity on the forums and on Twitter. It's a good thing that they're being communicative, but there are some things that we've been communicated that are red flags. I don't want to dive too heavily into them, but a few little like grab bag topics to think about. There aren't plans to reintroduce Master Looter as an option, so we will still be locked into personal loot. That's going to be a hit to your guilds again. There's still no plans to allow players to change gear in Mythic Plus dungeons, so effectively you'll have your dungeon set. You can't have a trash set and a boss set. Tier sets could be coming back, but nothing has been designed yet, which means the first tier of Raid in Shadowlands won't have tier sets.
Which is similar to Legion, by the way. First
Right.
tier Legion did not have a tier set.
Yeah, we didn't have anything out of Emerald Nightmare, but we did end up with tier, so that would be good, right? The possibility for tier coming in is a good thing, and I'm glad that they told us that. But yeah, there's a lot of iffy stuff. And again, like you mentioned, Sod, everything in the alpha is subject to change, and content that's been data mined out of the alpha is not necessarily in the game. One of the articles that I came across today, apparently, according to some of the data mined content, some people believe that Blizzard may be trying to phase out the mission table. This is where you have your followers and you send them on missions passively. They take like 8 to 12 hours to complete. The next day you sign on and you collect some resource, gold or AP, whatever it ends up being. It's possible with the trend of these auto battlers, and this is auto chess from Dota, which was adapted into Teamfight Tactics by Riot. They might have put in a auto battler to replace the mission table. But again, this is something that's from data mined content. There are no screenshots, there are no comments about it. It's just kind of speculation from people. I think if they do decide to do it, that's more game content that's replacing essentially what I deem to be another one of these chores about WoW. If you want to be an effective raider, you have to have also used your mission table effectively. You need to have, your highest level followers with good equipment so that you can for sure complete those really high percentage bonus objectives to get that extra AP so that your neck would be that powerful. And it applied back in Legion so that you could have greater artifact knowledge. And if they replace that kind of chore system with a more interactive gameplay aspect, I think it immediately becomes less of a chore and it becomes something you may even want to do if they do it right. But then it's kind of up to them to see if they do it right. I would imagine because of how minor a thing the mission table is, I don't know if they would really invest this much time into making a dedicated auto battler for this tiny little aspect of the game. But I mean, if they do a good job and there's a cool like 5 to 10 minute auto battler section where I take a break from grinding quests and I do a couple rounds of that, I'm going to be happy. That's fine. That's going to, not only will that be entertaining, but it's going to keep me engaged in the game for that much longer.
That's cool. I actually don't hate the auto battle title. I play Teamfight Tactics every once in a while. I don't. I don't know. I don't know how it would look inside of WoW. You're more excited than I am. If it obviously it's data mined, so whether we see it or not is a completely different thing. Like realistically, it could be data mined and already scrapped, right? But I'm not as excited as you about it. But if it is in the game and it's cool, that'd be great, right?
Yeah, it could be data mined and already scrapped. It could be data that is in the game but is being misattributed and it's just for something else. Like maybe this is essentially there is some information about new characters in Shadowlands that have new abilities, such as auto attacks and unique moves and placement movement things. This could just be a brand new follower that follows you around like a combat follower. Back, we had a lot of that in Legion, and then you would like put the equipments on them so that every world quest you completed, you got X amount of gold or whatever it was. It could just be an adaptation to the old school mission board. It could just be that. And I personally don't think that it's an aspect of the game that's worth this much investment. But I mean, I'm going to be optimistic and see what they come up with. I think, there's a huge vat of data mined information. And to say that specifically these things are going to become this system without any other content besides the data mining, it would be foolish to say like for sure there will be an auto battler, but it would be cool. I think that's kind of all we have for this week. Anything else that you want to talk about leveling? We wanted to kind of focus this episode in on the new 1 to 10, 10 to 50, and a little bit of the 50 to 60 experience. Anything else you want to add about leveling?
No, nothing yet. Can't really, I really don't have much to add until I get to experience it, right? And hopefully, you and I will see that. I check my email every day and my drop down menu on WoW to try to see if I get access. I don't think I will. I think alpha is always really tight, and it'll open up more at beta, but we should see more content in the alpha in the coming week or two, right? I mean, we're in the middle of April. They said by the end of the month we should have another zone and Torghast. So I'm definitely excited about that. I think anybody that's playing WoW should be excited about that. So just keep an eye on the content. There's so much out there. Obviously, pay attention to what you're reading. It could just be data mined and might not be 100% true, but everything with this expansion looks awesome, and I can't wait to see it. And maybe development might take a while, but it looks like they're moving pretty quickly, and it looks like Bastion is pretty much a complete zone, right? It didn't, the alpha from the content that I've watched wasn't very buggy, so and I know BFA alpha was very buggy early on, so maybe they're farther along in this than we think, and maybe we are on schedule for an earlier release than a lot of us predicted.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. And hey, if anything, you can all rest assured that there will be no more war forging, titan forging, or corruption style systems coming into Shadowlands. Our gear will be more important, and you won't end up seeing someone get their, I love this story on the forums where you go to McDonald's and you buy 4-piece McNuggets, and the guy behind you also buys 4-piece McNuggets, but his McTitan Forge into a 20-piece McNugget with fries and a drink. Right? That doesn't happen anymore. That's not going to be a part of Shadowlands. So that's one good thing that we can all be looking forward to going into it. But as always, thank you guys for listening. Check us out on Twitter at Barrens Chat Pod. If you guys have been into the alpha, either by playing it or watching the content, let us know. We'd love to see your take on what you've seen so far. And we will see you guys next week.